Hey, it's Ron McLean. Welcome to Hockey Talk on the Rock.
With Laura and Keith.
It's interesting.
So let's back up a second.
He played absolutely out of his mind.
It made no sense to me.
And now, here are your hosts.
Here we go. Back with Hockey Talk on the Rock, episode number 45, and it is Tuesday, July the 20th here on Salt Spring Island. We're doing a Zoom episode tonight because Laura got her shot today and she's bummed. More or less, and it affects a lot of people. Anyways, starting off with Canucks news. There was some news heading into the big roster freeze on Saturday, and we did a show on I think it was Friday night, speculating there'd be a lot of news heading into that, and there was, and the Canucks made a bit of a move. So, what do you think, Laura?
Okay, so I kind of have two thoughts on it. I know a lot of people are upset that he gave up the third round pick. It doesn't really bug me only because the chance of the Canucks selecting in the third round to develop a player that becomes the equivalent of Dickinson is pretty low. And I also like the move because now you basically free up Horvat from having the defensive responsibility. So you should be able to kind of put emphasis on two scoring lines. Also, JT Miller now doesn't have to be your third line center, and he can go up on the first line where I think he's the most productive. So I like all that. The thing that I'm not crazy about with it, and it's like just, it's the typical Jim Benning thing where like he is giving up an asset and this team is probably not at the point where it should be giving up assets still. Like, basically, for the Canucks to be competitive next year, they're going to need to add like a Dickinson, but they're also going to need to add like a top six scorer. And so it's, again, I'm not like going to cry about the third round pick, but it always comes back to the fact that, Benning signed all these like albatross contracts and then he has to get his way out of them. And to get his way out of them, he has to trade the picks. And I do know, like, when the McCann trade happened, which we'll get into in a second, I was like, holy crap, like, Benning got fleeced. But then it became pretty clear that, like, Toronto wasn't going to protect him or Kerfoot. So basically, Pittsburgh was doing them a favor by saying you're going to get to keep one of them, but you can essentially, like, add in the other player. So I think that's why the value there was a lot different. Because, I mean, if you look at the kind of bottom pairing defensemen that have gone, it's all been the second round pick. And I think for the Canucks to get like a third line center at a third, it's steep. I'm not going to say it's not steep, but it's not as bad as it could have been.
Yeah, okay. So to your point on the third round pick probably not developing, like Dickinson, he was a first round pick on his own, you know?
Yes.
And he fits into the age group. He's 26 now.
Yeah.
I initially thought they overpaid. The more it goes on, the more I kind of like it because, like you said, he does fill a need that they really needed to address. And like they're in a tough spot where they need to get better now, but they also need to get some prospects coming too.
Yeah.
So I'm fine with, as long as they're not moving first or seconds, really, I'm kind of fine with it.
Yeah, that's how I feel too.
And it's nice to know that like they won't be bringing back Brandon Sutter. That'll be a nice change.
Yeah.
The bottom six. So I'm going to give the W to the Canucks because it fills a role. And like, and the biggest thing too is, like you said, it moves Miller into the top six rather than third line center. And so let's say you have the Lotto line and then, Podkolzin pans out and Hoglander takes a step. You could theoretically see Pearson being a good right winger on the line for Dickinson, right?
Yeah.
Because he plays that good puck possession, grindy style that they could be a good checking scoring line kind of thing as a third.
Yes.
Being Captain Optimistic, I guess.
And yeah, the other thing about Dickinson is he does have quite a lot of like positives in terms of like a locker room guy too. Like during the bubble last year, he was one of the guys that was like pretty pro the whole Black Lives Matters movement, and he just seems like an all-around pretty good guy. And my prediction is he's going to be like the exact type of player that Travis Green likes. So yeah. All that I think is good. Again, the price is a little bit steep. I think I would still give the win to the Canucks just because of their record of developing anything beyond really the first or maybe second round. But
yeah, I mean, I almost wanted to give the win to Dallas because they did get a third for.
I don't think it's bad, right? Like, it's not a bad move for Dallas at all.
No, they got a third for a player they probably wouldn't have protected.
Yeah.
So theoretically, they could have got nothing for him if Seattle went that way. But we'll talk about Seattle more in the next little episode we're going to do after this one. So speaking of Dallas, I had the Miro Heiskanen re-signing
Yes.
deal as the next piece of news when he signed the other day for 8 years at 8.45 per. And it's awesome for them to lock him up because he is awesome, but it sets a pretty high bar, I think, for like people like Hughes and McCarr in Colorado,
Yes.
especially too because I heard today like Dallas or Texas has no state tax,
Yeah.
so that's like they were saying it's like more, it's worth more than 9 mil in other markets, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good deal for him, but I also think he's a very good young defenseman, so it kind of makes sense. Like for the Canucks, I think they could argue with Quinn Hughes that he's not as good all around as Heiskanen is, and so you'll be looking at a lower AAV. But like you said, because of the state tax thing, I don't know how much lower it will be. So we'll see. But I think yeah, smart move for Dallas, smart move for him, and he's got a bright future.
Definitely, yeah, he's pretty good to watch him in Klingberg, sorry, but
Yeah.
they're saying now that Klingberg might be on the market. Is one thing I heard today.
Oh yeah, I could see that just because of again the contract with Heiskanen, and then if they either re-sign Alexiak or fill in a defensive hole there.
And I think Klingberg only has 1 year left, is what they're saying too.
Yeah, and I assume his value would be pretty high.
He's good. He's
Yeah.
a good defense. So moving on from that re-signing, I had the plethora of deadline deals that came in on the morning.
Yes.
You know, the Canucks one out of the way, but we'll just kind of move into them, I think, as they happen. But I've got Toronto, as you alluded to, picking up Jared McCann from Pittsburgh for a 23rd, 7th round pick, or a 2023 7th round pick, sorry, and Hollander or something,
Yeah.
who was like a 2nd round pick in 2018.
From Pittsburgh too.
Yeah, he's going back again.
Yeah, their
It's
player.
happening.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think this is a win for Toronto, except for the fact that then they protected for defense, which I don't really get. I feel like they obviously don't want to keep one of those two guys because of the money between McCann and Kerfoot.
Yeah.
And it sounds like Seattle is going to take Kerfoot. Whether or not you believe that rumor is something, for another day. But I think the move to acquire him and then not protect him was kind of puzzling for me. And like they did it so they could protect Justin Hall, who's been good for them, but he's like, I think he's close to 30, and no one really knows how good a defenseman he is because he plays with Jake Muzzin, and I just think that was a puzzling move more than anything. And I mean, if Seattle wants to be like a really big dick to Toronto and be like, we're not going to help you out with your cap, they could always get Dermott and then be like, you're stuck with these two assets, which assume, again, they'll get something for those two players. They're pretty decent players, but.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I lean towards giving the win to Pittsburgh because they got something instead of nothing for a player they probably wouldn't protect it either. Doesn't look at like.
Yeah.
And jury's out on Hallander still, but again,
And the price too that like Seattle was charging for protecting or not selecting certain players was like stupid high. So I think this deal is really like in response to that, so that basically they got something for this player. They didn't just lose them for nothing, or they didn't have to give up, multiple picks or whatever to keep.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't mind Toronto paying the price they paid to, like you say, guarantee having that third line center.
Yeah, it's pretty low risk. I honestly think I'd give the win to Toronto because, again, those prices that they were going to have to pay with Seattle were going to be much higher than a 7th and like a B level prospect.
Yeah.
So, but both teams probably make out pretty okay.
Agreed. Next one was a big one for me because my guys in Philadelphia got in on the market, and something we talked about a number of episodes ago where apparently Nashville had some interest in Patrick, and Philly loves Nashville defense like we talked before, and they wanted Ellis, I thought. We talked Ekholm too, but yeah, I kind of thought it would be Ellis, and so they did get their guy in Ryan Ellis from Nashville for Nolan Patrick and Philippe Myers. who Nashville then flipped Patrick to Vegas for Cody Glass. So they essentially got Cody Glass and Philippe Myers for Ryan Ellis.
Yeah.
Vegas gets Patrick. I'm going to go first on this one and just quickly give the W to Philly because I know how badly they needed that type of defense. And like they needed it so bad. And they didn't pay an extremely high price. Like I like Myers and all, but it's definitely an upgrade. And I thought it was good to trade Patrick while he still had some value because he's had so many injuries, right?
Yes.
So yeah, and then the Glass is a weird one because he's obviously not panning out. So it's kind of weird that Nashville kind of preferred him over Patrick.
Yeah.
But like I can see Vegas wanting Patrick because they have such a need for centerman, and like maybe like if he pans out, I'm gonna freak out. But
yeah, I agree with basically everything you said. Like I think this is a classic one of like who got the best player, and Philly got the best player by far. Yeah, like Philippe Myers is good, but I don't think he's the same level as Ellis. And as you said, Patrick really needed a change of scenery. And then I think Vegas was smart to jump in there and pry away Patrick because, as you said, I don't think that Glass is really an NHL player. He was given like a ton of opportunities this year to play up in Vegas's lineup, and he just wasn't ready. And I feel, it's one of those things that you look back on, and at that draft, I really wanted the Canucks to take Cody Glass. I was like, we got to take Cody Glass.
A lot of people did.
Now you look back on it, you're like, okay, I'm very happy that they took Petey. So
yeah, no, that worked out very well. And I'll just quickly say, like Philippe Myers too, he was an unsigned, or I mean, undrafted free agent too. So he was kind of like found money. So that's a little bit of bittersweetness too in seeing him go. The next one I got on the list was I think it's going to end up being a more underrated deal now, and in the future will probably be like that was a big move. And I think it's San Jose getting that Aiden Hill from Arizona.
Yes.
For pretty much nobody goaltender prospect and second rounder in 2022.
Yeah.
So I mean, like they paid a second rounder for a guy who hasn't paid a ton, but I would still give the win to San Jose because like they recognize how badly they need to move on from Jones.
Yeah.
And this kid could be good.
Yeah, he's like basically gotten a lot of good reviews in Arizona too, and he is cheap, which is the other thing that San Jose needs, right? They couldn't have filled that hole unless you can get rid of Jones, which I don't think they can at this point. So I think that was a really smart move for San Jose. I really like the return that Arizona got because normally speaking, goalies don't go for that high. And especially because he hasn't played really, like he's played a few games, but he hasn't been a starter. So we'll see how it goes for San Jose. But the other thing about Arizona getting those picks is they have like no picks. So we'll get to the next trade with Arizona, but
and the fact that like Hill probably would have been unprotected in the expansion draft and maybe even gone for nothing. So the fact that they were able to pull that off was pretty big. I mean, it probably played a bit of a factor that they're kind of division rivals. So to be able to be willing to do that within division might have played a factor there. But I like that move. So the next one, I'm farther on the opposite side of the spectrum with the next one. When New York traded for the Rangers traded for the rights to Barclay Goodrow, giving up a 7th rounder in 2022 to Tampa Bay. I wrote my verdict before the signing thing happened, so I put win for Tampa Bay unless the Rangers re-sign Goodrow, because Tampa got a 7th for somebody they knew was out the door.
Right.
But obviously New York wins the deal because they extended him.
Yeah, and I mean the deal that they're extending him to is quite I'll say lucrative and long. So they obviously paid the price for not having him go to free agency, but it was a smart move, obviously, to ship out a 7th and get his rights. And yeah, it sounds like that's a done deal. We're just waiting for the roster freeze to end and he'll be a Ranger. And as you kind of talked about, and I think I talked about it on a way earlier like episode, basically like kind of the overreaction by the Rangers to be a tough team. I feel like this is kind of a direct move in response to the whole like Rangers Washington games, and I'm not going to be surprised if they actually add more kind of grit to their bottom 6, either through trades or through free agency.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Like ever since it got out in the media, there was probably even Messier that was like, they need a team that can bring the fight to the street or whatever the
Yeah.
dumb line was. But like as soon as I saw that they were going to re-sign him to that deal, that's instantly what I thought, and I agree that they'll probably, what's it called, overcompensate for the lack of physicality and size and stuff, and we'll probably see that, and hopefully it doesn't work out for them. So they're still in this for the next trade too, because it was just a minor one, but I'll throw it in there where they got a fourth rounder and this defense who I know very little about, Des Simone,
Yeah.
from Vegas, and Vegas got Brett Howden, and like my verdict was I don't care, like win to Vegas, I guess, because Howden's kind of a player and maybe he's okay.
Yeah, I think that was probably a move again, to like get around expansion or whatever. Because I could see Brett Howden having been taken by Seattle, and they got something for him. So I agree. I don't know. Maybe I give the win to the Rangers. I was gonna say I give the win to Vegas. Vegas has like a really easy position in all this though, right? Because they don't have to protect anyone.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, we'll take your kind of bottom six forwards.
I'm surprised because of like the expansion exemption they're in that they didn't like add a few more pieces there leading up, to be honest.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
like,
agree.
they had two young guys though, a forward and the
I
defense.
mean, they don't have cap, right? Which is the problem.
Okay, I got here finale. Finally, the last one that came in, I think, for the day was the Islanders acquire nothing, and Arizona acquires Andrew Ladd and his big contract, and a second rounder in this year's draft, and a second rounder in next year's draft, and a third in 23.
Yeah.
So obviously, I gave the win to Arizona because they got like three fairly sweet picks just to take on this contract.
Yeah, that
And
was
from the sounds of it, they're going to be moving out their good players to save money anyways. So they, like you said earlier in the other trade, they need picks. So
yeah.
what an easy way to do it.
Yeah, I agree. Went to Arizona there for sure, and then the Islanders shed a bit of cap, but they're probably gonna have to shed quite a lot more.
So I think this one's very humorous. Like I got a good laugh out of this one because it's Lou Lamoriello, right? And he's obviously at his finest, where he's like, "Oh yeah, Seattle, you want a first and a third for Ladd's contract," and then like 2 seconds in the third, just to go so far out of his way not to give them their asking of one.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, for sure.
I thought it was funny. Like 2 seconds are almost comparable to a first in like, especially with the Islanders doing good. But anyways,
And they're giving them like as part of like the conditions on the 1 round pick, it's like the higher of the two picks or something, which is pretty good because you never know. It might be kind of high up there, and then the other one might be like a third rounder, right? So
yeah,
yeah.
that's a good point. I forgot there was conditions on it. I did write them, but I didn't write like what they were.
Yeah.
So, anyways, that is all I had. Like my last note was Goudreau extended, but we covered that in the trade. So
Right.
then the roster's locked up and the news kind of stopped, sort of. But I feel like we're going to cover the rest on
The
back-to-back episode here. We're going to do a separate one for the expansion draft.
sweet.
So did you have any other signings or trades I may have missed before we move on?
I feel like it's all expansion draft stuff from here on in.
So all expansion draft. All right. Well, we're going to move on to back-to-back episode 46. So thank you for listening to episode number 45, and we'll be back in like a few minutes.